Georgina Woudstra. I'm the founder of an organization called the Team Coaching Studio. We founded I've been an executive coach for 30 years and team coach, but founded the Team Coaching Studio in 2017 because I really felt a need to help coaches develop more coaching in their team coaching. And that might sound a bit weird, but we'll be talking a bit about that a bit more today. I 30 years have just flown by. In fact, it was October 1993 that I started out, and it was, when Simon was talking about how the shift and how the world is changing, I was thinking back to going into organizations then to talk about coaching, and I only knew 10 other coaches in the UK. And learning and development, I remember a learning and development director saying to me, our senior leaders didn't get to where they are today by needing coaching. There was an assumption that they were already perfectly formed, they were invulnerable, they had to be strong, they couldn't even introduce the idea of coaching. So it's amazing how far we've come across those 30 years where coaching now exists in all different kinds of organizations. I know that lots of people here today work in different forms of coaching. Some of you might coach teams, some one-to-one coaching in organizations. Many of you might work as life coaches or as therapists. I'm here to talk about the vitality of human presence in a team coaching context, but it does translate to working with individuals and with groups. So you'll see up on the screen there, I've put it, it's about the vitality of human presence in team coaching, doing and being. So we'll be looking at the relationship between doing and being and the impact that has in terms of how we work with clients. There's been a rapid growth over the last few years of team coaching, and it's given rise to a whole plethora of activities that as practitioners we can buy into. There's a load of team assessments now available, so you can assess and diagnose the team. There are effectiveness models or models of team performance. There's a load of exercises you can buy, books full of exercises, facilitator guides for working with teams. You can even buy whole workshops kind of in a box, with slides and a script. And they can provide some really useful scaffolding. As Simon was saying, oftentimes when we're starting out, we need to learn some basics. We need some scaffolding. We need some framework to get ourselves in the room and to answer the questions, what is it I'm going to do with this team? And I remember that feeling of, agreeing to coach. A chief exec client asked if I could work with his team, and I said yes, because I was curious and I like a challenge. And then I thought, oh, yikes, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this team? And I was really nervous, and I was looking really, when I look back now, for how am I going to fill the time effectively? How am I going to perform? So I created a 2-day workshop that was full of things like personality profiles, team charters, and all this sort of thing. Why I love this picture is, some of you may recognize it. It's a beautiful David Hockney picture. To me, it encompasses, the scaffolding or the structure of doing, the trees providing a structure and a pathway through. But there's an aliveness, a vitality, a constant moving and changing. And beyond the trees is a place, to me, that speaks of being, that speaks of stillness, that speaks of the capacity to be present to the aliveness of the moment that's unfolding. So it's kind of like we go through the trees, we go through the scaffolding, we go through the need for tools in our journey as coaches, in order that we can, as Jung said, as we can let it, in order that we can let it go. And I agree with Simon, the word mastery, I find deeply uncomfortable, but I do believe that as coaches, we are always, and I'm always on the road to mastery. I'm mastering. I'll never get there. And I love that. And part of that journey of growth, of evolution, of having greater impact as a coach is working on our way of being. So whilst doing with a team matters, our way of being is often the most profound catalyst for change. When we focus on being rather than doing, our awareness expands, we become more grounded, we become more fully present, more available, using words that link into Simon's talk, more fluidly responsive, more available in the moment. We're more attuned to what's needed. We can let go of content and pre-planned agendas and what's in our heads and use ourselves as an instrument of change. So let's think a little bit more about what this means. I'm going to invite you to put in the chat. You know, I've put a chart here on the screen that you can see says doing and being on it. If you're able to type in your chat, I'd love you to enter one thought. What if we're thinking about doing and team coaching, doing and working with teams, what comes to mind? What's one or two things you might be doing in team coaching?
So I've opened up the chat, but you might just need to change the drop down at the top to say everyone. Otherwise, it may come as a direct message.
Lovely. Thank you. Great. Yeah. So we've got here facilitating a process, asking questions, listening, maybe reflecting back, going through an exercise, observing, team diagnostics. I can't keep up with them. There's so many coming into the chat, but brilliant. There's some great contributions there. We're doing something, we're taking an action, or we're preparing to take an action. Let's pause there. Now switch your thoughts to being. Think about being in relation to team coaching. What are some attributes of being? Let's type those in the chat. So curious attention, breathing, being present, open, centered, not knowing, listening for what's not being said, calm, sitting with discomfort, focusing on intuition, unshaming, grounded, attuned. Beautiful. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. And I'm noticing your feelings. Yeah, we could go on. I've captured a few here, just a few. Maybe obvious things, we could be administering team assessments, sharing of theories, all sorts of theories, teaching conceptual frameworks. We could be setting up exercises or planning agendas, sharing slides like I'm doing now, interviewing team members and stakeholders all around a predetermined plan. The attributes of being are more about holding space, as you said, noticing, sensing, and particularly the relational aspects like Simon was talking about opening ourselves up to being impacted by the team, by the moment, by the situation, staying in the here and now. Often to activate my state of being, I'm kind of clearing my mind, actually. I'm grounding myself. I'm enabling more space inside myself. I'm switching off from thinking about agendas and exercises. I'm making myself as available as possible to the emerging moment. So the world of development, and particular team development, because that's what I'm thinking about today, seems to be informed by at least two actually very different philosophical approaches to learning and change. each with a distinct set of core assumptions. On the one hand, we see a deterministic orientation, which is primarily an orientation towards cause and effect. So to activate cause and effect, we need diagnosis. We need to seek an objective analysis of reality, often measured against norms. Let's take a load of teams, measure the results, create a set of norms that says what an ideal, perfect, or high-performing team is. Let's measure against that. Let's identify the gap. And then we've got some different, often predetermined exercises or workshops to close the gap. So, for example, I've identified this team has a gap in trust. Here's the science or what theory says about trust. Now I'm going to pop in a workshop around building trust and use Covey's speed of trust or whatever your particular frame is as a workshop. So that's one orientation that's clearly there and quite linked in a way to the grow model or solutions focus like Simon was talking about. On the other hand, you have a different lens, a different take, which is more of an emergent mindset founded on the belief that people are creative, they're resourceful, they're whole, they have the solutions within, they can find the answers, they are full of untapped potential. And the role of the intervener is to be a partner or catalyst, unleashing that collective and creative potential of the team. The emergent lens believes that change happens through an unfolding of awareness through sensation, through creating awareness. That gives way, awareness gives way to greater choice. Choice leads into experimentation, leads into change, into action and change and application. These tables make it very black and white, don't they? Very polarized. And you might sit in a different place. You might sit with a different lens or somewhere in the middle. But do we have an objective picture of reality that can be determined by a rigorous approach? Or do we believe that people make their own reality, that reality is dynamic and emerging and participative, is meaning made through diagnosis from an expert who's provided measures to evidence why that meaning is being made, or is meaning made as a social process through generating awareness, through creating meaning? So we have these two very different mindsets, and linking this to what am I talking about this? How does this link to presence? Well, it links because your ideas shape how you show up. Our philosophy, our concepts around our role as a coach shape how we intervene. So if I believe that clients are creative, resourceful, and whole, which I totally do as a coach, then I'm going to trust that they have the answers, and my role as a catalyst, that they can identify and create their own best model or concept of team effectiveness, that they can untap their own wisdom to get themselves to wherever they want to be, whatever the changes they want to create. It's not for me as the coach to impose my will on the team and try to shape the team to become what I think the team should be, my picture of performance. So that's my philosophy and how my ideas shape my approach. Now, you may have a very different philosophy. It's really important that we understand how our ideas, our beliefs, the principles shape how we show up, and that we're congruent to those. So you could say that being and doing are intrinsically linked. In team coaching, we need a bit of both. The doing aspects create the container And when you're clear on what the work is, what we're here for, when you do some lovely contracting, when you create a safe space and set some boundaries around the work, you're providing a space, you're creating a space in which the emergence can unfold, in which the work of the team can surface, the real work, which we can identify what that work is. I sometimes think of it like an artist with a picture. If I were an artist and I was given a frame, an A4 frame, and some colouring pens, and I was a bit nervous about painting something or drawing something, I'd give it a go. But if you gave me the whole wall of a Tate gallery, unbounded, vast wall, and no frame around it, no boundaries, it might be overwhelming. I might not even open my box of crayons. So the doing aspects are best used, I think, when they're focused on creating a container for the work. And then the being aspect is being really present to what's wanting to emerge. You see, many interveners, many coaches, facilitators are adept. They've developed a lot of skills at doing with teams and with groups. They can design great sessions and can organize and design something to have their intended impact. However, the intended impact sometimes isn't sustainable. The peak contact experience, the peak learning experience happens in the workshop and then fades afterwards. And that's often because it's the intervener who's doing a lot of the work. They're bringing the meaning making concepts, the tools. They're being very captivating about how they bring it to life. They're doing the work. It's not really owned, bought into, lived, practiced, got into the bones of the team and how the team works. You may have seen this quote before. I absolutely love it. This was quoted by Bill O'Brien, who was the chief exec of Hanover Insurance. So the success of an intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener. So if my head is in, where are we on the agenda? What's the next exercise? Or like Simon was talking about, wanting to be the expert, to know, to have the answer, to exercise my will on something. If I'm attached to the outcome for the team, because that reflects on my ego and what I've brought in, all of those things are getting in the way of me being able to create that spacious interior condition where I can flex my presence in relationship to what's emerging in me, what's emerging for the team, and what's emerging in the situation, the ever-changing context. Again, like Simon said, that lovely quote about, you can't get into the river in the same place because the rivers keep changing. The situation is always changing. There's no fixed moment in time. There's perpetual with teams. It's always changing. So I'd like to share with you a little story of how you can use this, or how I've used this. I just need to put my glasses on to read, otherwise I shall talk too much. So this is a story of a small team. There were 6 people in the team. The team was formed in May. It's a project team, really. They were charged with organising an incredible celebratory event, event, at a conference in Costa Rica for an organisation's top 100 performers. This small team of 6, they're due to present their plans for this celebratory gathering to the executive team of the organisation at the end of the month, where they want to get support for their plans, or to know if the team wants something different, get the go-ahead so they can start planning it. They agreed to work with a coach to support them in working effectively together, because they're a disparate team. They hadn't worked together before, with a desire to create an amazing gathering. In an early coaching session, imagine this. The coach sits back, imagine their presence, their way of being, sits back, softly holds the space, pulls back, allowing the team to get started in their meeting, making room for the team, saying, talk about whatever you need to talk about. The team are talking about the next steps, including doing some research on other companies who've created similar celebrations. The conversation runs on, people keep popping up different ideas, but none of those ideas seem to gain any traction. The coach observes this, notices that the coach is feeling some anxiety, feeling some frustration. This seems to be going nowhere. They've got to present in a couple of weeks' time. The coach creates more space inside their body, notices that the energy field feels a bit flat and has a bit of a sense of going through the motions, a bit of the sense that the team might not be really engaged. Senses something's up. The coach intervenes, comes forward, raises her energy, says in a clear, crisp tone, the conversation feels a bit flat to me. I find myself wondering your level of engagement in this project. It might just be me. I've just joined in on this thing recently. But how about it? How about you have a conversation between yourselves about your level of engagement? And then softly pulls back again, noticing a shift in the team's energy. Something has palpably changed. The coach creates space, softens, widens the focus, observes with soft eyes, as we call it, creating space, intentionally holding that space. One person said they knew about the project and the deadline back in May, the deadline for the presentation, but they had all these things going on that stopped them from engaging. Another team member said, I sent you a presentation about what we should be doing here in August and nobody responded. Another one said, I never responded because I was away. I told you I was away for 6 weeks and I'd respond when I got back. This frustration was building. Instead of calming it down, the coach leant in a bit more to signal holding the container. Just a slight shift in presence and being, and signaling, carry on talking, carry on connecting with each other. Yeah. Eventually, the team realized they were speaking more truth than they had ever spoken with each other in this team. They were going really into a storming phase. They realized that one person had been perceived to be very pushy and imposing their ideas, and in doing so, others had disengaged. Others had disengaged also because they were busy. They talked about how they were going to recalibrate, how they worked together, how they could meet each other on the same timeline in order to coordinate their presentation. And so it went on. It's a small example of the coach's presence, by and large, as an intervention. Very light touch, small interventions, letting the team get on with doing the work. So when you think about it, you can think, what was the coach doing? Was mainly holding space, was staying here and now, hadn't directed the focus for the conversation, hadn't said what the team needed to talk about, or given them a process-based activity about what they needed to talk about. Hadn't said, now let's do a round, each person talk for 2 minutes, listening to each other, making eye contact. Had just let the team interact as they are, but been really present with the team, been with the team, been using the coach, using themselves as a tuning fork, really, making intuitive leaps around the intervening, but holding it lightly. Using yourself as saying, what's coming up for me may not be right. In fact, could be far from what's happening for you, but let's open up the conversation. So, this is a model from the team coaching studio. In the heart of our team coaching wheel, which has competencies in it as well, we have these meta skills, which we call a methodology for change. And the beauty of these presence, use of self, and active experiments is really in many ways they're your toolkit. You don't need a lot more than that, other than some great questions and the capacity to do some good contracting with a team. But this is your primary toolkit for change, because what we're doing is we're being present in the here and now to the emerging moment. We're letting the team's natural patterns of interaction, their natural state, reveal itself rather than trying to mold it by our own will and our own accord. And then we're creating awareness, offering choice and change. And then you can get to offering experimentation. So the coach in this instance might say, I notice a pattern that I'd like to share with you. Is that okay? I notice people offering ideas and proposals, but they don't really seem to take any energy or to be followed through. How about, just as an experiment, for the next 10 minutes, you pick one of those threads, one of those ideas, and each other person in the team says what they like or dislike about it before moving on to another thread. Let's try it. That's setting up an experiment. So, just checking my time here. I've got to 1:30, haven't we, Ruth? Is that right? Yeah, okay. So you'll see in the heart of this model, we've got philosophy and stance. That takes me back to the start of where we started today. How we show up, our way of being, how we intervene is informed by our philosophy. If we believe that the team is creative, resourceful, and whole, we let the team system, their way of being, unfold. We're not trying to mold it by our will. We bring our tools, our own presence, our flexible presence, shifting, for example, between an evocative presence to create a container and a provocative presence to create change. We intervene using ourselves as the primary tool. We invite experiments in the here and now, not predetermined activities that we've planned to do before the session, but experiments that meet the emerging phenomena that's the team's way of being. Experiments to offer up more choices about ways of being for the team, and then give the team the opportunity to reflect on that. How did that work for you? What was helpful? What wasn't? How might you refine that experiment to make it more useful? Let's go again. Really light touch opportunity to use with your opportunity to intervene, really, with your own presence, your own way of being at the heart of it. I'm just sharing you this because this is our model for team coaching, which is an inside out model. Your philosophy and stance that we've talked about quite a bit, your mindset, your ideas at the heart. That's your philosophy. Your stance is really like a set of mantras that you can use as a coach to help you stay true to your philosophy. So if I believe that teams are creative and resourceful and whole, then I'm going to say to myself, trust the process, trust in the wisdom of the team. The team have the answers. Let this play out. I don't need to know. I'm not the expert here. The team's the expert. These are all aspects of my stance. Then we've got the meta skills that I've described. Around the edge, we've got 5 clusters of team coaching competencies. Competencies are a bit, in a way, like horizontal and vertical development. You can learn them as a set of exercise or tools, but really getting them in the bones is more of a vertical exercise. It's more about getting them into your way of being. So, for example, contracting can be an exercise. You can follow, say, a Stoker's model or a Grow model or whatever your preferred model of contracting is as an exercise. Or you can have the principles, the relational principles of contracting in your bones and notice what's emerging. Notice your felt sense around what's in the room. Notice the situation, which is what's the brief for the team coaching, what are they wanting here, and contract around that. So you can turn something from a tool into much more a way of being through our noticing and responding. The recognition that we're constantly in mutual reciprocal influence. We're taking in data, we're giving back in exchange. And then right around the edge, we've got tools, techniques, models, and frameworks. They're nice to have, and they can enhance the team coaching experience. They can create a bit of relief from the team from the intensity of just using the meta skills. Because whenever you're using a framework, tool, technique, you're directing the team's attention. You're leading and saying, hey, look over here, or hey, let's try this, or here's a model or theory I want to introduce to you that I think might be useful. So we see those as almost on the periphery and to be used lightly, whereas often they get, it's like flipping it around really, because often they get put center. One of the things I'd like to add is that, when I work with coaches one-to-one and have been in sessions like this with lots of one-to-one coaches, hands up if you do one-to-one coaching here. Let me see you. Quite a few people. Yeah. So keep your hand up. Yeah. If you plan a one-to-one coaching session, keep your hand up. If you plan it and you go, let's say our session's starting at 3:00. At 3:00, we're going to do this. 3:10, we're going to do that. And I've got this exercise or activity at 3:30. And then I'm going to share this concept at 3:45. And then we're going to close with a debrief. Okay. What do you notice when you look? Now let's try again. Keep your hand up if you work with teams and groups. Your hand up. I know this is a bit exposing, isn't it? So you might not want to. But if you're brave enough and you want to play with me, keep your hand up. Now, imagine you're starting a team session at 3:00. How many of you would start with? Keep your hand up if you would start with, okay, at 3:00, we're going to do this. 3:15, we're going to do that. 3:30, we're going to do that. 4:00, we're going to do that. Something has shifted in our mindset, our concept of our role. We're exercising more will over a situation, often to ease our own nerves around that question, what is it you're going to do? Often in response to a team who've said, what are you going to do? Sometimes you could think of it a bit like armor. We're kitting up to get ourselves in the room. All of that's fine. And I've done plenty of that in my lifetime as a coach. And oftentimes there's a certain amount of a need for that preparation at the start of work to build the container, to build safety, to create a space. But if we perpetuate that, then we're existing in a space where we are exercising our will on the team. We're directing the process. We're telling them how to engage with each other and how to be through a series of exercises. And in doing so, we're inhabiting a role of leader in some way in a team. We're leading and channeling the energy of the team. We're not able to meet the team in their natural state, their unaltered state, where awareness can be raised around where they're at now. What are the patterns of interaction? What does it feel like being in this team? What's the opportunity for change? A snapshot there of my book for those of you who are interested in team coaching, Mastering the Art. No, notice it's not mastery. Mastering the Art of Team Coaching, the ongoing, unfolding, messy, challenging art of team coaching. And do reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn. Every team that I've worked with is different, and some have high expectations of credibility, or at least I'm assuming that's what they're projecting onto me. And therefore my countertransference is to try and meet that credibility. So that links back to the interior work on myself, and to unhook from that and kind of trust the process. I think I perhaps don't have the language of getting it right doesn't go through my head too often. And I think that might be because I'm really open to thinking I might intervene in a way, offer an observation, share something, ask a question that totally doesn't land, but that's all data. So that I've just noticed right now talking with you, Chris, that one of the things in my stance that I use often, a mantra in my mind, is it's all data. And that helps me just sort of disconnect from any cause and effect mentality. It's almost like, I'm trying to, in my own way, make contact with the field of the team. Sometimes I do make contact, sometimes I don't. Like you do with a human, sometimes you have a connection, sometimes you don't, in one-to-one coaching. So you try again a different way. Okay, that didn't quite land, that didn't quite make contact in the way that it could have done. Let's pull back and see how it plays out. Yeah. Sometimes for me that, growth happens quite slowly. I might have that idea like you've had, oh, I'm just going to be me, and then find it difficult when I'm in the room because of that transference and counter-transferential relationship. So something I find helpful is I just try and create a little bit more space for that. So I'm just going to be me is quite a big leap sometimes if we're adaptive to being an expert or whatever it is we're adapting to. So I'm just going to create a little bit more space, a bit more room for me, and notice what happens. Sometimes it's a bit more realistic when I'm trying to stretch my edge. We have a sort of saying in the team coaching studio that I really value, which is contact before contract. And I think sometimes for people who, I won't say you do this, but it's quite tempting in for facilitators or trainers to go straight in with an exercise, or go straight in with, what do we need to agree today? And I often think, well, would you really want to go and make a contract with somebody you haven't even had any contact with? Be like asking them to sign a legal agreement, before they've even read it or know who they're signing it with. Contact is so important in terms of who is it I'm making this agreement with, because we are relational beings, and that's why every single team experience, every encounter with that team is different. Take the pressure off. And I hear for you something about just creating a bit more space. A bit less content means more space for emergence. And sometimes a team coaching studio, we talk about it and think about it. Imagine a sort of chain link of sausages. And each sausage is like a little unit of work, a little piece of work. Then maybe if you're somebody who's used to using a lot of content, you have a few sausages that are content based that give you that bit of relief and bit of control. And same for the team. But you open up some more sausages in the chain link where you're opening up to whatever's wanting to emerge. You could be canny in what you call that if you need to start out giving them agendas, because that's meeting them where they're at. I might call it something like reflection on, or diving deep into one of the topics that's come up in the previous conversation, something like that. But mine, I've got nothing planned for it, no design other than presence, use of self, and experimentation. Yeah. So you can create small containers for it rather than jump off the deep end and go straight into emergent working. It's like building up a muscle. I mean, I can do often go and work with teams these days where I can engage with them with hardly any prep, and they're plenty happy with that. But I think it's that I have learned over time how to communicate about that, how to trust myself, how to get in and do that work, and that's what they've heard of that I do, and that's what they expect from me. But you know, not many people go there straight away because of where the market's at and what people's understanding and expectations are. You can influence them around opening up more space as well. I find the more I know, a bit like Chris was saying, you know, your experience, Chris, with some of the best work you've done is when it's much less planned and more open and emergent. The more I know that, the more I'm able to propose that to a team through my presence, through my voice, through my belief, through my interior conditions, and them to go, okay, you know. We've got a program that goes on over best part of a year, academic year, and a huge amount of that's dedicated to practice. And in the practice, we give people very little time to prepare. Their preparation, often working in pairs, their preparation is what do you need to say each other to begin? Okay, let's go. And I think it's, you know, it's sort of building up a muscle really of knowing and trusting that you are the tool, a little bit like, you know, one-to-one coaching where you've got the competencies but you've got no idea where it's going to go.
Yeah,
because that's the nature of the partnership. So, and we have something, we have a community of maybe 1,500 coaches. We have something called the Arena, which is where we do little simulations and practice often a particular little team dynamic. Let's say we've got a dynamic where you've got an overly dominant leader and the team are not engaging or interacting much. They've pulled back because the leader's so forward. Let's look at that and let's practice how we might intervene. Let's just get into it and practice.